Hi, welcome to session 2 of Rewiring Supply Chain Digital Transformation Odyssey. So, this session I would term as from data to decisions. If session 1 was about understanding transformation, session 2 is about understanding the fuel behind it, what is known as data. Imagine every process, every transaction, every customer action leaving behind breadcrumbs. But unless someone turns these breadcrumbs into a story, they just stay, isn't it? In this episode, Veena and I explore how data becomes insight and insight becomes an action. We talk about the shift from the spreadsheet to Power BI or Tableau, SAP Analytics, SAP Analytics Clouds, how visualization is a language and one that must be empathetic, contextual, and human centered. We discuss data lake, big data, data bias, risk governance, and the emotional intelligence needed to design dashboard that leaders can trust. From forecasting to sales insight, from inventory visibility to operational discipline, we cover how data storytelling shapes real business decisions. We go behind the scenes into how large digital programs are run, program governance, ROI measurement, change management, influencing executives, and building credibility through consistent delivery. This session is a journey from seeing the numbers to understanding them to finally acting on them with clarity and confidence. A must watch and watch it completely and stay tuned for session 3 and 4. Thank you.
Hey, good morning, Veena. Welcome back to the second session of digital transformation in supply chain.
Good morning, Sandeep.
Definitely, it's a pleasure to have you once more. The series which we are doing on the digital transformation is an important topic. And in the previous topic, Veena, you have given very interesting and interesting insights on we talked about the foundation of the digital transformation. You touched upon the AI, touched upon the ERP, and other aspects of it. So
Mm.
maybe in today's session, we'll talk about the data visualization, data analytics, big data per se, and then we'll cover other topics as well. So starting the today's discussion with the data visualization. So the times have changed. Operations when I joined 20, 25 years back, now the things are pretty smooth, pretty easy, and thanks to data visualization. In my view, in operations, this has helped immensely. So what are your thoughts on the data visualization, where we started, where we are, and how we are going to shape it up?
Yeah, Sandeep, you rightly said, right? And I think as we worked together in the past, when we talked about, well, we are going to do like a Tableau or like for that matter, any tools, right? A
Yep.
visualization. And my first reaction was, oh, all of these are in Excel. So how is this going to benefit the business, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, all these reports are done. The data, particularly in the previous role, we know that the data is not an issue because you
Mm.
already had a data lake, which actually bring the ERP data together in the same definition. You
Yeah.
basically standardize that. And then, there was a SQL queries which are running and you kind of report it in a specific format, global or customer or factory wise or CFC wise, I mean, distribution wise or whatsoever, right? My first reaction was like, really? How is this going to change the game? But I was proven wrong. Happy to say that, right? And I think it is all about when you talk about the data visualization, how we do it, right? Because it's not
Mhm.
just putting what you have it in Excel into the visualization.
Yeah.
Rather, you think about what is the outcome that you want to drive, and to drive that outcome, how the visualization should be.
Yeah.
So I know whether it's an inventory, whether it is sales, whether it is forecast, whether it is order or whatever, right? The key question is your audience and what do they want them to do? What do you want them to do after looking at the visualization, right? Or
Yeah.
dashboards for that matter. And I think that is very important. So once you do that, because what your executive wants to see versus what your day-to-day operation team want to see is different, right? Because
Yeah.
for executives, all you need to know is how do we do today, right? Or
Correct. Yeah.
where are we today and what do we do now, right? Whereas for working people or like
Yeah.
the people who work with the data on a day-to-day basis, you want to know what do I supposed to do next or how do I resolve the
Yeah.
problems that I'm seeing, right? So it's really interesting to see how we bridge these two together so
Hmm.
that we are talking on a same base data and the same base visualization. And I think that is the key. Now, I think it is even further evolving now to say that just don't give me I have a problem here. Can you
Yeah.
also tell me how am I going to resolve this? What is a potential opportunity for us to recover it or really fix it more proactively, and
Yep.
also give me prescriptive solution about what I should be doing based on historical, right? And that is where I see that the visualization, which need to be actionable,
Yep.
at the same time now it is getting evolving into giving the solution also for a similar problem. Obviously you always have an outlier where it's something new happening and all of that, and that you still need to do what you need to do. But again, if it is a traditional, if it is a historical problems, and maybe yesterday with the supplier A, now with the supplier B, obviously you can still go back and do potential recommendation.
Yeah.
And it could also turn to something that where you're monitoring your pulse of operation, whether we are meeting the target or not meeting the target. If you want to meet the target, if there are gaps, what actions can be done more proactively rather than you realize it at the end. The visualization can be very powerful because
Yeah.
you can't fix what you can't see.
Absolutely.
So that's the thing, right? Right now I feel like it's just not a dashboard, just not the way how the data is presented. It's even transforming into how it can help you to resolve the problem more proactively as well. So, and pretty much all the tools play the role, right? Whether it is ClickSense or Power BI or
Yeah.
Tableau. Yeah.
Rightfully said, Veena. So there are multiple teams involved. For the benefit of our young audience, they are the functional teams who are the consumer of this data. They will be again divided into, as you just shared, the executive management who need to see how the things are moving, or the people who are doing their execution, the operational team who are really into doing a daily task, whether it is inventory, whether it is procurement. There is a functional team, and then there is a team IT who manages these dashboard on the back end, on the servers and the data lakes. And then there's a team of developers who is developing these dashboard or just doing the maintenance whenever it is required. And then there's a team of analysts as well, the business analysts who are working extensively between these 2 to 3 teams, juggling between the what is the business requirement, how that can translate it to IT requirement, right? So this is a piece which looks a simple dashboard. There's a much more effort going behind the scenes. So for the benefit for our audience or the viewers, Veena, can you take us through more in depth of this, how the people should be able to relate to it, but they should look forward to in each of these roles a bit?
Okay. So for me, let's talk about maybe from the back end onwards, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So even, when people think about if you're like a data engineer, right,
yeah,
who's actually bringing the data from your source system into your data lake, people think that you're just like a SQL person, right?
yeah,
In my view, yes, it's about like, what kind of skill mix that you need to have in each stages of this process.
yeah,
Now, the data engineer, yes, they need to be aware of how you do your data extraction, data ingestions, and
yeah.
transformations and make it available for the consumption. But I also feel that to some extent, they need to know the data that they are working with. Very simple example, right? In the past, we gone through that also, Sandeep, right? Where
Yeah,
people build the dashboard, they put min and max because you're rolling up to the high level
yeah,
from the lower level data, and there are certain space where you can't do that at all, right?
correct.
But when you put that, it's not giving any business outcome or business value to it. So they need to know, like if they are working with let's say order data, they need to know what's the lowest granularity that they can get to, right? And really structure the schema properly then for the analytic purpose. So I believe that it's not pure technical will play it. You
Mm-hmm.
should also know a little bit around the data awareness or data savvy, you want to call it
Yeah,
that way, right? And then from that, data engineers, then we are talking about like your transformation ETL experts or whatever the ETL is, who is actually transforming the data. The next one is really somebody who's understanding not just the one element that what you're bringing in, but within the schema, how it's going to fit and trying to provide your end to end, right? So you call it as, I don't know, business analyst. There are different names we are calling.
Yeah.
That could be like we are calling it as a supply. I mean, in today's world, we are also talking about data analysts.
Yeah.
Because in your AI, when you're really looking for certain models and things like that, you have to know your data better in terms of applying what models and things like that. So you need that data analyst who actually looks at the data to get the business sense of it, right? And then you have a BAs who's actually more business process oriented. So they can work with the users to talk about, really drive the conversation such a way that, what we are trying to get to as an outcome. There are times, like we go by just a pure BRD,
Yeah.
even in a mature organization, we end up with the endless who's right, who's wrong. Like, you didn't say this, I didn't say it. I think it is about how do you build that partnership with your business where it's the conversation is to and fro. I mean, you don't have to serve a cup of tea, right? I mean, you need to know what ingredients that goes in. So why not coffee? Why they are asking for tea? So to me, that business analyst role is also pretty important. And then obviously you have a dashboard developers. Now the dashboard developers, in my view, they need to be. I mean, I think there are certain companies who's big enough who actually have a UI UX design team who's actually looking at user experience and, when you present these data, like how it will be used and, how it can be easily, how the message can come out easily. So, but then if there is no UI UX team, you can't afford to have it, then it actually sits with the dashboard developers. That's where I feel sometimes we fail because we know how to create the dashboards, but not in a way how the users can adopt it, right?
So
Then
where and how to
obviously,
put the things for that perspective.
right. Right. In those scenarios, what I recommend team is like, okay, this is what you're trying to do. Can you go and sit with them? You don't have to ask any question. You don't have to write any documents or anything. You go back and work with your business and say, what are all the key meetings or reviews or tasks that they do? You just go and sit and observe, right? Sometimes you get things that way rather than documented process. Trust me, how many companies just follow to the dot all the documented process?
Yeah.
Your document process is always a happy path, right?
Yeah.
And you always have, I mean, supply chain is all about exceptions. So
Yeah.
if everything goes smoothly, you don't need
You don't need even supply chain in that case.
exactly. So it's really go and sit with them, observe, not just for a dashboard. I'm saying for any digital work, right? That actually gives the nice perspective. And I mean, in these days, I'm even asking my team to go and sit in all the business reviews and things like that. So when you talk about the prompt engineering and things like that, you know what kind of questions comes in those meetings, right? So yeah, I mean that's the thing. And I have seen dashboards which get delivered in 2 weeks. I've also seen dashboards which get delivered in 1 year. So it's also, I mean, of course, it also goes back to the complexity of it, but also whether all of these individual roles comes together nicely as a team, it also matters. Yeah. What is your experience though in the past?
I believe in one of the organization we worked, Veena, that we were able to really extend a couple of dashboard even to the business partners, the suppliers as well. I believe that was a good win. Everything cannot be shared openly with the supplier partner because of the security compliance, and definitely yes, the supplier able to look at the parameters which you are maintaining for them is really a good win and saves a lot of efforts at both the ends. And definitely that's act as a catalyst in the upstream processes. So that was one good example which I can recall of. And I fully agree with you. They are the dashboard which are quick wins. But then they are the dashboard which takes years and years, and we are always frustrated in the operations team why we are not able to see it on live. In a couple of organizations I worked, it has taken a lot of time. For example, vendor management is basically where we are extensively working with our suppliers. So there the things doesn't look like that. Okay, we are dependent upon certain outside business partner. Things are not entirely with us, and then we have to navigate through the channels of legal, compliance, security. Of course, other aspects remain on normal IT, the business analysts, and the approval chains which we have.
You didn't expect this kind of complexity with the dashboard, right? Which I
With the
think
dashboard. So how do you see the things changing rapidly from here? And do you see this thing as well? Because I will be touching back again and again on AI, because recently, it was day before yesterday, somebody was telling me that every single GET or graduate engineer trainee which is coming in the organization nowadays is looking forward to work on AI and data. They don't want to go on any other function. They don't want to do their hands dirty, the real job, right? They are like AI and data. So from their perspective, and you also gave the guidance that yes, AI will be everywhere, every aspect of our life. So how this part is going to shape up?
I mean, I think a simple dashboard as such or visualization as such is, in my view, is a yesterday thing. Today, like what you said, right? How do we convert how these are evolving into collaboration mode and also actionable and taking an action, and it's giving you how I have taken an action. I have seen this problem, I have resolved it. Here is
Yeah.
how we resolved it, right?
Yeah.
So then it becomes more like a auditable pieces as well, because even with the AI, any action that we do, any automation or any auto execution that we do from an operational perspective, I mean, it's a clearly need to be auditable. And I feel like these dashboards will give you that audit results in a better way so that
Yeah.
you can make the right decisions on whether it is behaving in the right way. And I mean, I think if you think about it, just presenting what is the current KPI performance,
Yeah.
I don't think people are satisfied with that anymore, right? They want
True.
to know, okay, what's my projection look like? Yes, I have
Mm.
a problem today, say whether it's an inventory, whether it is I'm not able to meet my financial forecast for the quarter or something
Yeah.
like that. But that's where, I mean, people are like, okay, but what's next, right? So they're actually looking to even look at like what is the perspective on, I mean, I would say predictive stuff
Yeah.
to be embedded, right? So gone those days where like when you're running your predictive models, you have to ask your business team to really get an approval to be and embedded into the visualization and do it. So today when you're really thinking about visualization, right, just not think about taking the existing data, transactional data, and then you present your KPIs, but then wherever it is possible, how do we embed the prescriptive proposals, even if
Yeah.
you want to keep the human in the middle, right?
Yeah.
Or you want to go in a agentic way, how do you then bring it
Hmm.
back the results so that it is already, it's one place where you can see what is the current situation, what action that was taken, and what is the end results now we are seeing, right? So it becomes not just a dashboard, but actually giving you the overview of where your operation is and what actions anybody is taking. And again, the collaboration piece is coming loud and clear as well, because not just with us and external, but also within the individual functions. How do you handshake between them, right? Even in the past, your visualization or the dashboards, people come in and see like how you're doing it, whether there's going to be any backlog issues, whether there's going to be an order delays or something like that. But today they can trigger an action from there and ask a factory, is there any alternatives and things like that. Then it becomes more collaborative. Then you've started to get that unstructured data, which will be then useful for you, then start defining perspective answers in the future, right? So it's not just about displaying, you're also capturing the new data which doesn't exist in our enterprise systems, whether it's ERP, whether it's planning, whether it is any of those, warehouse or any of those, right? So in the past, those used to be in your emails and Excel, right? So now visualization also includes those, right? Where you're capturing the data which is in the people's mind and Excels, right? And then it can be a training ground for your AI as we move forward, I would say.
Okay. So definitely a lot of interesting thing happening here as well. So we are now coming discussing about the project and program management. So all these kind of changes and in digital transformation, those can be carried through the structured methodology of project and program management. So any insight you would like to share how the project management is done from the digital transformation point of view? The small project, as you said, one dashboard probably can take a couple of days, couple of weeks to maybe an year, maybe, and then there will be a sort of small projects, then the enterprise level projects as well, programs as well. right? So you would be juggling and your teams would be handling, right? So what is the guidance? What are the insight you would like to give on this parameter?
Okay, so I think it's really like when you start the program, right? There are
Yeah.
few. I mean, I know there are people who's like completely on agile, and there are people who's are
Yeah.
completely on waterfall. Of course, our technical friends always prefer to have a waterfall because there is always a risk of if you go into the agile, this never ends because
Mm.
the continuous improvement keep coming,
Yeah.
right? There's no logical end to it. But then waterfall, I mean, I think in today's scenario, how effectively we blend this depending on your process maturity and your organization maturity. I have seen both working. Like, for example, you have a very tightly integrated organizations, even though you have like a planning manager who is separate, inventory manager who is separate, factory manager who is separate, but their KPI is all tied together, right? Your waterfall will work because they all come together very nicely because their end or their goals are very I mean, it's aligned, right? So, but then I don't say that like it doesn't happen, but not every project you'll end up having this, right? So you really need to assess that, for where do we start? I mean, where are we starting the whole project with, right? If you really need a flexibility to readjust it as we evolve, I would recommend for agile. Now, when you're going with agile, you need to be clear on where do you stop, because after a certain point a return of investment becomes minimal. It's all become nice to have, very outlier scenarios, things like that, right? Maybe we should stop there because that's a diminishing return, right? At the end of the day. But when it comes to the like a waterfalls where your process is much stable, again, even if you go with the waterfall methodology, I don't like the waterfall with like a 1 year duration projects, right? Because I mean the process today will change within that 1 year, let alone technology.
Yeah, absolutely.
But again, it's a clear. I mean, I think both the model has a clear advantage, and I think we need to be smart enough to assess and then decide which way that we are going at the beginning of your scoping or for your assignments. But at the same time, make sure that you are clear with your stakeholders. One thing also, maybe you can comment me there, right? One thing that what I'm also realizing is that in the past, in when you are like moving from traditional to the standard ERPs, right?
Yeah.
You used to have what do you call it as a super users, power users, key users,
Yes.
whatever
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
different terminology, but they're almost like full time, right? They do that. But I don't see that today anymore.
Yeah.
There's not one person who's going to give you all the requirements. I mean, those days are gone, I guess, because you don't have those dedicated team, right? It still have yours. I mean, everybody wants to deliver more with the less people. Everybody wants to be more efficient and things like that. So when you have these kind of setup, I feel agile works better because um, also when you are really going for a requirement, if you have a well documented process document, SOP documents and things like that, waterfall might be okay. But if you don't, then that's also another place where you will end up with the agile because
Yeah.
it's, if you are working on a job for, like, I don't know, X number of months or years,
Yeah.
you go to them and say, what is your requirement? They don't know where to start, where to end, right? It's, you have to keep asking questions. They will keep telling you, right? And then you start mapping the process based on the answers that you're getting. Again, I think it is about where you stand in the organization and the process. Then you kind of mix the methodology. So I wouldn't recommend fixating with one or the other. But in AI, I find agile looks okay, particularly on the Gen AI, right? But when it comes to traditional AI, like predictive stuff, people ask me, okay, so if you are able to run a prediction only for 50% of the population or this category of my products or things like that, how do I do for others? So really figuring out that hybrid way of implementation in production is also critical in my view, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So, apart from that, that some of the projects which we work, there's a scope creep. the cross-functional, cross-organizational projects, and they take months and months or years and years of completing that, right? And so how to hold the nerve at that point of time, right? So top management is looking for the output, and the things are falling apart and the scopes are changing, or there are certain challenges happening, and you just said the agile looks much better, right? On the ground level situation, what's your guidance to the project manager or the program manager in such cases?
Okay, so I mean, I always say however you plan, every project will have a scope creep. Every project production will have an issue. I think the success comes from how you manage it, how well that you engage with your users, how well that you engage with your stakeholders, right?
Yeah.
Normally I shy away from projects which is like two things, right? One is for sure you are in doubt. For sure your stakeholders are in doubt whether this will work or not. Maybe I won't even prioritize that, right? But but the other way is fine, right? Like if your stakeholder thinks that it will work and you think that there is a question, or vice versa, it's easy to really try it out and make a decisions and get it aligned and move forward. But again, I think how you are constantly engaging the stakeholders in terms of the status, in terms of where we go, where are the challenges, and be transparent about the challenges, right? We don't have to sugarcoat the project status.
True.
Of course, I have seen cases where there are stakeholders who wants to hear only nice things, but those kind of a thing is, I mean, you just have to, as a project manager or program manager, you have to make those decisions because if there are problems, there are problems. There's no point in sugarcoating it. And the other thing I would always now I'm telling my team also is don't get emotionally connected with the project, right? Or technology that you're working on, because that is going to be a challenge. Because for me, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, right? So it's okay to fail, but it's like how fast we fail and we learn from it and move on, right? So don't be afraid to pull a plug if it is not going in the right direction, or it's not giving. I mean, how many stakeholders you have seen, Sandeep? They will give you a ROI of like super ROIs, but when you deliver, the actualized will be like this much.
Yeah.
Next time I'll be very, very careful with those guys, right? I mean, you can go with that like once or twice.
Yeah.
So you know your stakeholders. That's my key. And once you do that and you know how to manage them, then throughout the project, you keep your communication transparent, clean. And if there are stuff where you know that it's not giving you the results, or it's not going in the right way, or you're getting stuck, raise it. Don't battle yourself. And yeah, don't be afraid to stop in the middle. It's okay, right? I mean, now coming back to the AI world, right? How many POCs are hitting the production today? I mean, if you're able to scale 2-3 out of 10 experiments, that's successful. So yeah, don't worry about people. You don't have to say what stakeholder wants to hear, right? I mean, you manage the communication, and when you have a problem, admit it, right?
Okay.
Right? Nobody like the surprises, right? We show everything is good, but last minute we want to delay, or we need more money, more budget. That's when people get irritated also. So yeah, I mean, don't give surprises, right? I always tell my team, right? If you're moving the date, you move it at least, depending on the duration of the project, you move it at least 10-20% before the the live date that you have projected. If you're doing last minute, nobody's going to be happy. So for that, I think we need to be transparent. I mean, that's
Scope creep, for that matter, it could be a creep. You can ROI, anything can change midway, right? Midstream.
Well, the requirement change in this case, right? We manage it. At least my go-to method to manage it is really two things. Whether, because there are certain users always want to be picky about very specific scenarios, right? So I always ask them, so what's the percentage of this scenario in your total portfolio or volume, right? If you're telling me it's 30% and more, fine, we have to address it. It's just 2%, 3%, right? Deal with it as an exception, right? So we always try to look at the relevance of the scenario or the requirements that they are bringing to the table in the overall scheme. That's number one. Number two, which is, I think probably we have been practicing it for the last 10 years, probably. Whenever you hear something from the users in terms of the requirement, in terms of importance and all of that, I always tell the team, please validate it with the data,
Hmm.
right? Just don't go by like what people are saying. I mean, we have seen enough where people say, oh, this is my 50% of the issues, right? But when you go back and look at the data, it's not even 2% of the issue. So when you present the disagreement with the data, it's a less emotional arguments. So yeah, I mean, I think, but of course, I mean, then you have to build that relationship, right? In the long run, obviously that helps.
So just in continuation of this topic on the project and program management, you are touching upon the so-called risk as well. So if we talk about specifically about the risk and then governance and strategy part of the digital transformation. So what are your views and insights on that?
Well, the risk is really like, you take one of your consideration too far, right? Meaning,
Yeah.
yeah, we want to be, I mean, okay. There are cases where I have seen where people want to be double sure, triple sure, right? They, I mean, it's like good being enemy of your best, right?
Okay.
And really identifying those breaking points or
Mm,
like a flipping points, right? We should manage it. The PM should manage it. Are we really taking certain criteria to the extreme, right?
mm,
Even security or risk adverse, right? I mean, there are people like, they never even want to take a single risk,
mm,
right? So yeah, then you need a different strategy to work with them, obviously. But I mean, in the AI world, what we do is we, I mean, as long as it's not touching your personal data, as long as it is not, we know there are certain data set invariably, very biased. So when you have use cases which is using those data, we don't really do that today. Or we actually create a synthetic data which will balance the whole data equation, right? Then you start to do the training or things like that. But that's why EDA is important. How you do your data analysis in terms of what do you have today and what kind of bias that you have. Now, when we talk about these bias and all of that, people say that people always think about, let's say, um, human in nature kind of a bias, right? In certain data, like when you're really looking at the factory data, most of it is going to be a male in all the in mechanical space and all of that. But I can tell you, like in a practical terms, even when you're looking at your quality data, the data is going to be biased because most of the time your yields are going to be 90, 80 in those ranges. So the quality data is only 15% of your total equation. So you really need to understand that bias to see how you're tuning it. Yeah. But if you're looking for a success rate, well, your bias is different, right? So even at the nature of the transactional data and operational data, you will have bias. So you need to understand based on what you're trying to execute it, what is the bias that we are talking about, and how do you adjust your models to do that. Right. If you do that, then the risk of having a wrong decision or like getting a wrong auto fix or recommendation will be much, much low. Right. So I think that like yesterday we said, right? Data is a new oil for the company, but people who understand the data, interpret the data, going to be the real key asset as well. Without understanding the data, these solutions or any of these digital ones is going to be very difficult, and you will get into all these different things, right? Now, coming to the governance part of it, right? Part of the governance, obviously, we are looking at technology governance in terms of are we using the right framework, right technology, tax, and all of that. But beyond that, we are also looking at is this use cases really touching your sensitive stuff, right? In terms of the data sensitivity, right? Um, like for example, we don't do facial recognition in our company today for whatever reason, because the base data of the facial recognition, risky or like a break-in people or something like that, it's always tend to be black and whatnot, right? So we don't do the facial recognition today. We don't do a lot with the end user. At the same time, people talk about all this logging and checking whether people are using it responsibly or not. we don't track it by user ID name as well. That's the personal privacy stuff. So we will make sure that each of these applications are, at least from a design, it is there. And there is also an audit after it goes live at a regular basis to see whether it is complying to all this checklist. And then the other element of the governance is this aligned to your corporate strategy, whether it is current year strategy or next 3-year strategy, whatever, right? If it is not aligned to your top goals, it's off the table because you have a very limited resources to do it. The very important piece that what we look at it is organizational readiness for the use case. Because if that organization is not ready, not mature, most likely, even you do a good work, it's not going to be adopted. So we always ask them to work on some of the foundational stuff before we do anything. There's a digital transformation or AI or automation. So we look at the adaptability, what kind of data for us to do the training, and in terms of the user expectation also. That is also part of the governance, because when we are working with them, what KPI that you're trying to improve, right? Let's say if they are saying that I want to improve my inventory. Okay, fine. Or like I want to improve my focus again. Okay, fine, right? Or I want to automate this particular process, right? And you just have to ask them, like, what is the current state? So if your current state is 100% manual, and you want to automate 100%, probably it's a years long project, So the change management is going to be heavy, and really going through that is going to take long time. So we use some of these is also to prioritize your projects. That doesn't mean that we'll never pick the difficult ones, but you don't pick everything difficult, then you don't have any move, right? Or like improvements in the organization, right? So I try to kind of have a mix. If I run like 5 projects, maybe one at the max will be very complex and challenged and all of that. The others, but there are certain criteria is non-negotiable, right? If like you're saying, like if there are users who has asked you certain projects in the past and they never used it, I mean, the history, right? So unless I have them, signed with the blood, well, you're not going to do anything. So things like that. So when you do that, I think, I mean, beginning you will make enemies, but over a period they do see value in it, right? And they, because when we are successful, they are successful too. As long as they realize that, I think we should be fine.
Veena, if you come back a step behind, it's on ROI. So how to get the executive buy-in on the ROIs, and what exactly the CXO suite is looking forward to from specifically from the large program management bigger projects, or maybe what's their mentality, how they look at the top down on the entire digital transformation initiatives.
Okay, so this always has been topic for discussion, right? Even in the olden days, in terms of whether we go top down or we do bottom up. I feel we should allow both. We should have, like, even if it is coming from the bottom up, it need a middle manager alignment as well, who is responsible to put the change in place, right? I mean, you can get a direction from CEOs. I mean, sometimes that gets like cascaded very fast. But again, when you're going like 2 level down, and and then your bottom up, you have a challenge, right? People will give you this stuff down the throat, and like they feel like they don't understand the details, and they give you all the nitty-gritty details to solve. But I think what we do is we actually get I call it as a level 3, level 4 management, which is more like a middle level, who's actually directly working with the the actual transactional people, and they have to sign up to what we are getting into. Now, when it comes to ROI, it's always a $1 million question, because particularly when it comes for people efficiency, I mean, I see that if your ROI has, let's say, inventory changes or ITO improvement or cash flow improvement or revenue improvement or revenue mitigation, cost avoidance, those categories are easier to crack and easier to get an alignment compared to efficiency part of it. Unfortunately, when you talk about automations and some of the Gen AI, it translates into productivity. Right. So it's always going to be a challenge, because people worried about they being out of the job. But again, for the other category, it is always like when you're starting the project, you define what's your base KPI is and how you're going to measure it, and embed the how you're going to measure it as part of your solution. That is the best way. If you are trying to look at the trend of inventory, how it is going, if the inventory reduction is your target, it should be part of your solution. You don't expect people to do a manual tracking, manual reporting of the benefits. Mostly that doesn't happen. Or it happens in the beginning and then it just dies off. Or when there is a people change, it just dies off, right? But if you embed it as part of the solution, these days, what I tell my team is there is two metrics that I always look for: adoption metrics and the benefit, how we are going to measure it, embedded within your solution itself. And that will then automatically gives you that input. Now, coming to the productivity side, particularly Gen AI is a challenge. And I'm thinking, I mean, we are still figuring it out how we will put it. Because when you talk about all the knowledge, or like, let's say you have all the co-pilots, right? Let's say you have MS Copilot, you have a GPT, you have everything else. The way how Microsoft gives you a calculation, pretty much you don't have to be there, because they say that every chat is 10 minutes saving, right? I don't know. I mean, I myself personally agree or not, because maybe your one chat in a Copilot resulting in 20 minutes of double check, right? But yeah, I mean, I think the Gen AI piece is still figuring it out. We are figuring it out. How do we measure it? Because I mean, right now we are doing it by surveys, but again, you do a survey at the working level and you go back to the manager, hey, you can cut like 6 people. They'll be looking at me like, okay, how? So it's like, I think the Gen AI is really tough. But then the other digital, like automation, productivity, and things like that, is easy. But again, my key advice would be that embed how align it at the beginning and you embed it as part of your solution. Right?
Okay. So any projects you would like to recall or talk about, which are your favorite, were easy or were complex, and maybe some pages from out of your huge experience?
From a digital perspective, in my previous role, I think you know that as well. We had this because we come from a EMS environment, right? A contract manufacturer side, and we don't have the rights to do any changes in the demand, right? However, the inventory doesn't sit in their book, so it's not their problem, right? As long as it's not a UL product. So they just continue to load the demand, bring in the material, but then actualization doesn't happen. So technically, by contract, they are supposed to do, they are obligated to pay us the inventory costs and things like that, right? Now, you know how the contract terms are, how ambiguous it is, how you can interpret it to your advantage, obviously. And obviously, you also have years of practice with the customers, and maybe you have some gentleman agreement beside the contract, give and take. So then this comes to this projects where they wanted to look, because the inventory was growing up heavily. And then, so there was this projects where they want to claim what is customers are obligated to give to us, right? And you can imagine how many back and forth, not just with the customers, but even within our internal team, right? What supply chain wanted to say versus the sales team or the PM team who's interfacing with the customer want to say, because they want to protect the interest of the customer, because they want the customer. So, anything that you do, they will say it's the wrong interpretation. This is not this, that is not that. And then you also have all this kind of side deals and side agreements in terms of cash in advance, and those are the stuff where it is never the same way. Like each customer is different, each site is different, how people deal with it, right? So we had a projects to say how we can digitize this, make it visible, what customers are obligated to pay, or like what is contractually entitlement, right? Yeah, I almost took like 2 years, because
2
every
years.
customer is different, every language is different. At those days, you don't have an LLM which does the interpretation and summarization. But you being from a supply chain, you want the best interest of supply chain, and you have a BUs who is the best interest of their customer, and it's always difficult, right? And the first question people will say is system was wrong, and I can't trust. And one customer is wrong, they will say like they can't trust the entire other customers also. which is a challenge actually. But in your OEM, it might be slightly different because you're just doing it for your own company. There's only one interpretation and you're done. But then in the contract management is different, right? So it took us a while. What we figured it out is we allowed the sales guys to go and configure the terms. What we do is we actually populated it based on the system and what lawyers say. And then we went to the site and say the PMs and the sales team, okay, so what is your interpretation? And then we just settle at the rule level first. And then it's something like your sales forecast and operational forecast, and then you come up with the consensus stuff. And then based on the consensus, then you start putting the calculation out. And it's kind of a compromise, I would say, because if your intention is really to do with the contract, just go with the contract, right? But again, I mean, at the end of the day, I think the project still gave a quite a good return for the company. So what I'm trying to say is getting into a hybrid, getting into the somewhere in the middle is also makes sense, right? And that is where you need to understand the dynamics. You need to understand your stakeholders and the business and your end goal. So you're still not compromising the end goal. So that way, yeah, we have to change the solutions and get it work. But even we change the solution, get it work, we have to go customer by customer, side by side, look at your top 10 revenues and whatnot, and then manage it that way. So the company size of that or nature of that, it's not about just bringing the solutions, right? It's about continuous roll-up that we are doing also, right? So that also very important when you're sizing your projects, when you're looking at resource requirements and things like that. Is it something like you go live, you do your golden transaction and you walk away, or you need to handhold them or continue to deliver longer? Because I mean, fair enough that you will not have that much of development like how you do it in the initial solution, but you still need to make some adjustments here and there as we roll out to the new customers or new sites. So that is also important when you're looking at the project sizing and resource requirements. And it is challenging for me because those not just within cross-functional that I need to sit and do, but I have to talk to customers as well. Part of that, we also need to prove that, what customer did is created that inventory. So it also have to start from their lead time setup, the whole supplier onboarding and their demand and everything else. So it'll give you the complete view of the customer business. So in a way, it's also a good learning curve for people.
Absolutely. Thanks, Veena, for sharing this extensive piece. I know that how integrated it would have been. And definitely, as you said, that it was a success. And I'm sure that EMS industry is running on thin margin, and a lot of things are happening. And there's a quite good learning for all the participants there, for sure.
Yeah. Maybe with the AI, things would have been different now.
So, Veena, we are almost close to the end of 60th minute for this session. So, I believe we can continue our discussions tomorrow. And thank you so much for your time. And definitely, the discussions are quite interesting and insightful for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Veena. Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye.